Alright, cool. So this is content creation, and we're gonna get started. So this is just gonna be kind of a conversation, and just let you know that we are here for you guys. And if you have conversations or questions that pertain to something that we're talking about, just raise your hand, and we'd love to answer it. And good news is there is not another panel in this room after here, so we can stay here forever.
That might be bad.
It's true, it's true.
Forgot my sleeping bag.
Stay with us forever.
Exactly. So first, my name is Ryan. My name is Ryan Gamp, and I run a website called Living the Nerd Life. We're a content creation website, and we also help other people market it and produce their stuff. So if you have a game, or you are a blogger or a podcaster, we like to post your content and help share that stuff.
LivingTheNerdLife.com?
LivingTheNerdLife.com. Yeah, and have cards and stuff, and you'll be able to get all that stuff. So then we'll just go down the line, say your name, and yeah, what you do.
Okay, I'm Phil Stortzum. I'm a blogger of 7 years. I run a blog called Super Philip Central that covers pretty much everything right now, except mobile, but since I just got a smartphone, I'll soon be doing that. Since starting, I've reviewed over 600 games. I do a lot of interviews with people like Yacht Club Games of Shovel Knight's Shovel Knight fame, Happy Badger, who's here for Smugglecraft, and even Butterscotch Shenanigans. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Roberto Hoyos, and I own a company called Throwboy. We are a plush and entertainment company, so we specialize in, well, we're most known for emoji pillows, so we do like the poop pillow and all that stuff. We also do some entertainment, so I do a weekly webcomic called Pillow Fighters, which is a comic about these 3 pillow-shaped characters, and they sort of come to life in this boy's mind. It's like Calvin and Hobbes meets Ninja Turtles. And then I also blog. That's why I'm holding the camera so often. So I do 2 times a week. I vlog my life and what I'm doing behind the scenes at Throwboy, and that's on youtube.com/Throwboy.
Okay, my name is Wade Cole. I've been with Fear the Boot RPG podcast for 7 years. Besides that, I do Funny Books, another podcast at ideologyofmadness.com. I've done audio fiction, serialized written fiction, print fiction, pretty much anything, blog. If I can get out there and get my name out there and just interact with people and somebody asks me to do it, hence I'm here. Whereas if someone asks me to do it, I'll be there.
And I'm Chase Kennedy. I run a podcast called Gamers on the Go. It's billed as an archive of handheld games, new and old. I'll have a guest on each episode, and we talk about a specific gamer series in depth, and that's gamersonthego.com. And then I'm also now cross-promoting and part of Ryan's Living the Nerd Life site.
Yeah, so now so I met up with Chase, and now we take his podcast and we actually put it on our platform and put it out there.
So collusion, basically, like we're...
Yep, we are together. We are one to rule the world. So starting off, I just wanted to give people a little bit of information. How did you get started in your content creation? Just briefly.
We start.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how we'll do it then.
Yeah.
Well, I started Super Philip Central. It wasn't a blog because at the time I was so internet illiterate I didn't know what a blog was. So I actually posted reviews that I did on a message board, and I put them in different subsections, and that was very bad to do because no one really cared about that until I started putting it into a blog. And I decided to do a blog just because I love talking about video games, and I love writing, and I love playing video games. So it's like combining 3 passions of mine into one, which was awesome, and still is.
So my company started after I made some pillows that look like the Mac icon, so like iTunes and Finder and all that. They went viral on the internet. This was not intended at all. This was just supposed to be a gift. And so that spurred the idea to start a company that made like these unique plush pillows. And social media was just starting. So like Twitter had just started. This was in 2008, 2007. And Facebook had just been open to the public and stuff. So I jumped on that, and basically my whole thing was just sharing. So like I would share, photos behind the scenes, And then I got into YouTube really early and started doing videos about just updates of what we were doing. We got really deep into we got embraced into the YouTube community. Well, I should say I did, by like the big time YouTubers who were doing it and having huge success with it. So ever since then, I've been doing a little bit of video, a little bit of you know, all the social media. Like I do my own Twitter and I do, you know, Facebook and everything like that. And then later on, just about less than a year ago, I started doing webcomics. And then, like I said, I'm doing full-time blogging, so that's what I'm doing now.
And we got a game coming up.
That's right, yeah. And Ryan and I have worked on a game together, based on the Pillow Fighters. So it's a little web game that's going to be on the Pillow Fighters website. And we want to do more games because we think the Pillow Fighters could have a lot of property to be able to do their stuff with, and it's our own original IP.
Yep.
Okay. So I always wanted to write, but I was a huge procrastinator. And about 8 years ago, a buddy of mine came to me and said, "Hey, you want to write some articles on our blog for our podcast?" I'm like, "Sure, I'd love to. What's a podcast?" And that was kind of the beginning. I mean, from there, once I started writing for them, then I started podcasting myself. Then I started, went over to another podcast. Then I started writing, like I said, serialized fiction out there. And it was basically, once I started doing one thing, I wanted to do it all. And I found that by putting this out there publicly, there's an expectation of timing. And that's what I personally needed to get past that procrastination. When people were out there asking, "Hey, where is this? Why isn't this out this week?" That's what I needed to personally produce, because it's not what I mainly do for a living. It's my hobby and my side projects.
I wrote game reviews in college for my student newspaper, and eventually it got to the point where my arts editor called me up and went, "Hey, we're doing this arts podcast, and can you be on the video game section since you've done a number of those reviews?" And I knew what podcasts were from listening to some stuff in high school. And I was like, "Yeah, okay. I don't know if I particularly have the voice that you're looking for, but I can jump in." So I did that for a while, and they gave us 5 minutes, and we took 20. And then I became the arts editor, so we got 20, and we took an hour. And then when the new arts editor came in, they went, no, you can't do that anymore. But the group that I had thought, no, we actually really like this, so we ended up going and doing our own thing called World 8 that was kind of our own podcast that was just a general thing. And we did that for a couple of years, and then we all graduated and kind of separated. And as that was going on, I really have a passion for handheld games. And I was told by a guy named Patrick Klepek, I don't know if any of you know him, he worked at OneUp.com and Giant Bomb, and now he's at Kotaku. And I met him at PAX and was just talking to him about how to kind of get yourself out there more. And his big advice was find your niche, which is something I've heard from lots of other people as well. But that was the one that stuck with me because he's famous and he matters. So knowing that I loved handheld games, I thought this is my niche, and that's what I went to. But handheld gaming's dead, so it was a bad niche. Don't do a handheld gaming podcast. But that's where I am today, and I've been doing that for a couple of years.
So out of curiosity, have you ever gotten over hating the sound of your own voice on recording?
No, absolutely not.
Because that is a podcaster's biggest secret. We all hate the sound of our voices.
And the great thing about being on a podcast with 4 people, my podcast has 2, maybe 3 usually. But when you're on 4 and you're editing it, you get to hear 3 other voices that aren't terrible. And so editing's fine. But with mine, it's me asking questions and somebody else answering them, and I have to hear my voice 50% of the time. And sometimes edits go a little quicker than they should because I just can't stand it anymore.
A good edit will add at least 10 IQ points to a person, though.
Yeah, very true.
Just taking out the ums.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Chase got into this a little bit, which was finding your passion and finding what I like to call your voice, your specific voice. Do any of you have a specific story of how you kind of found your voice. You were kind of directed by someone, right? Like you were saying, Jason, and you kind of like really fell in love with, or already were in love with handheld gaming, and it kind of naturally was something you went towards. So it made sense to create content about that. Correct? That's kind of like what you were saying.
Absolutely. Right? And so I knew that I wanted to do the podcast, and the question was really just how do I format it? Who do I get for it? Because those three other guys that I was with before in my previous podcast, we're all at different parts of the country now. But I have another friend who's in Nebraska who has a podcast that he doesn't do anymore, but it's really good and you should check it out. It's called This Podcast Contains Spoilers. And the format I just straight up stole, which is just him and one guest. And the point of his is they spoil just one piece of media. And he talks about books or games or movies and that kind of stuff. I said I really like that idea. I actually got to be on his podcast for The Thing, and then also The Thing in 2011, which was a not as good podcast or movie. But I just like the format, so I decided to take it, and I had him on, so I feel like he blessed it by doing that.
Yeah, and Wayne, so you also, so most content creators, when we start, it's usually we find something that we're passionate about, right? You're usually driven to something you're kind of already involved in. Is that, do you feel like that was something that influenced you?
Definitely the case. Big RPG gamer, been a comic book fan since I was 12. So those were topics that were really, they're things I just like to talk about. The hardest part about finding a voice wasn't content-wise, it was basically letting go. Because when you sit there in front of the mics, the first thing you're thinking of is, people are going to listen to this. I should be presenting it like I'm talking to all of them. And that can work depending on the content you're creating. But if what you're creating is a podcast where you're talking to other people around the table, that doesn't work. You have to be able to just let go and let some of yourself out into it. And that was the hardest part, was just forgetting the mic was there and going with it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But at the same time, though, you need to realize that an audience is going to be listening, and for at least a person who's designated as a host or whatever you're going to do, you have to know that there are people listening on the other side. So if somebody makes an inside joke or something, that's probably something that needs to get explained. Or if somebody makes a hand sign or something, and this is audio, man. Nobody saw that. I guess I now have to say, well, he put his hands up in a wolf sign, I guess.
Yeah, and we have the, it's not even an unstated rule, we've actually stated it. We don't talk politics, religion, or any of the major controversial subjects. Everyone on the podcasts have their own opinions on those. That's perfectly fine. The podcast as a product does not. It will not take a view, because we don't want to alienate anyone. We want everyone to come, feel included, and be comfortable. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as we're talking, not letting our own political views or our own views on any topic come out in that content. Because as far as we're all concerned, that's not the place for it. People came for entertainment, not for a mess, not for those types of messages.
Like battle between people. And so, Roberto, do you feel like that's true with you? Or so I kind of know your story a little bit, and I feel like you definitely have started with the passion, and you kind of were really interested in that. But as things have went on, and you have a company now, do you feel like you've kind of branched out to things that aren't necessarily a passion initially, and have become something you've seen as really valuable? And there's a distinction between like, oh, I just love this and I do it because I love it.
Right.
But now you have a company, and it's like, well, some of these things I need to do because it's good to show my brand.
Right.
I still love it, not that you don't like it. But yeah.
I think what I found early on was, so when I started Throwboy, it was mainly just product and brand first, and it was more, since it was one person, I didn't really want people to know that it was like one person. I wanted it to be taken more seriously. And but then I realized when I actually just started to show what I was up to, like, oh, I'm taking a picture of, like, because I used to sew everything. So like, oh, here's a picture of me sewing whatever pillow. And then I would do like live streaming, and I realized the more that I let people in, the faster the company would grow in like name and recognition. And I wasn't doing anything like really that. I wasn't trying to be like this, crazy zany guy
Sure.
that I'm not really. Like I was really just, to Wayne's point, just really trying to like let people be yourself. And I know it sounds like corny, but it is kind of true because I mean, there's all sorts of very popular, let's say YouTubers, and they're not all cut from the same mold,
Yeah.
And I think more recently I realized, okay, I'm not one of these crazy like teenagers on YouTube. I am a business owner and I'm in my 30s now, and I should reflect just what I'm doing right now as a business owner, because I feel like the audience that is younger and that is interested in Throwboy beyond just the brand are looking at it like, oh, this company has their stuff together. This is what they're doing, So I think really my mantra now is just like share, and just be authentic, because I think in my company, I've steered away from it a few times, and it's like very obviously that it doesn't take hold. Like people find it fake when you're trying to be like, oh, let's do like what's the popular trending challenge video on YouTube, and we try to do it, and then like no one cares. But then I'm like, I literally pick up the camera and just start doing my day, and then we get tons of comments, and I'm just like, why do people care about this,
Yeah, sure.
But I think you just get kind of wrapped up in the stuff you're passionate about, and you forget to like actually let some people see that you're doing it.
Yeah, almost like in your point, the creation of your product and who you are and whatnot.
Yeah, so now I just try, like I said, I'm back on a normal schedule for videos, so now I just try to show people what we're doing, and it's so having it be broken down that simply for myself makes it less intimidating to like, I'm gonna create, videos every single week.
And I have to edit all this stuff and come up with all these ideas or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you hit on something I like to call imposter syndrome. 'Cause when you talked in the beginning, you talked about you didn't want people to realize it was just one person, not the big company.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. I had the early thoughts while podcasting of, when people realize that just anybody can go out and do this, why are we special?
Right.
But I realized pretty quickly that not everyone wants to go out and do that. Some people just want to partake. And the more open and available we seem to be, the faster the community grows. The faster the community grows, the faster the audience will grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's really been for us, is building that community of people.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so Phil, I feel like in a similar vein of all of us, you really started off of a passion, right, for video gaming and gaming in general. And then more recently, you've been doing a couple interviews with indie dev people too, and that's still in the passion realm, right? Because now you're kind of transitioning into making games and exploring that. And so is that, I guess, you wanting to kind of seek out those people, is that just also so you can learn and you can give it out?
Yeah, it's somewhat of a learning experience for myself. I get to ask the questions that I want. I get to say, okay, well, what made you want to do this? And then I'll go, even though I don't have a goatee or anything, I'll go, very nice. And then I might attribute that to one of my games I'm working on.
Yeah.
But it's also just to spread to, for local indies, it's helped boost their appeal and their brand and their game to other people. Since Super Phillips Central is, it does get viewed by people all around the world, which was surprising. It's like, who the hell would want to read my stuff, But yeah, it's part selfishness that I'm interested in learning about, so I can attribute it to my own video games. It's also because I'm really just interested in what they did, because I just love everything about games.
Sure.
And the other part is to help raise awareness for their content.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Have you guys ever, something I've always been interested in is, have you ever, or do you currently, and have you ever had a goal for the content you're creating? Now this could be very broad. This could be just to have fun or learn. Like I think that you were saying, like your goals are to kind of selfish at sometimes, but it's okay, right? Because you're also sharing. So you're wanting to learn from these people and grow, but you're also wanting to share and help other people learn and grow. Hey, does anyone else feel like, do you have goals right now where you are? Like, especially, I know Roberta, like you said, you have a company and you at some point need to have some kind of goal, I would imagine.
Yeah. I think early on it was just so it was like promotion for the company, like, oh, we should be doing video. So because it was just me, it ended up being a vlogging channel, and I didn't really intend that to be. But then, as now I have employees, and now my time is a little bit more freed up from physically sewing everything like I was doing a couple of years ago. So then I was like, man, maybe I should go back to that vlogging thing, because people seem to really like it. And I started back up just about a few months ago, and all of a sudden everybody like who was fans like came out of the woodwork into the comments, and I was like, geez, it's so weird. Maybe I should keep doing it.
Yeah.
So that's now my current goal, is like to get really honed in on the YouTube side. But also because we're also doing some products that are co-branded with big YouTubers. It's called Throwboy Loves, insert YouTube name here.
Yeah.
So we've signed a few content creators to do these like pillows around their marks and around their likenesses and around their logos. So now another side goal is like trying to kind of ease into some of their videos as collaboration, because like collaboration is so big on YouTube.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my goal in terms of YouTube, and then Pillow Fighters is just trying to put out a comic every week, which is a challenge, you know, because I draw it and I write it.
Yeah, and I know, specifically with Pillow Fighters, we've talked a lot about that because we are working on a game together, and that's what you're wanting to really start this kind of new brand or section of your company.
Right.
And to do that, you want to bring awareness before you just launch it.
Yeah.
So you are starting the comic, the web comic, and then we're going to have this game. So we're kind of starting people seeing things, so that when you come up with the product, it's not just like, oh, hey, this is a new thing you've never seen before.
Yeah.
Oh, these are these things you've been following and seeing, and we're starting to build those people looking for that one thing. Right?
Yeah, I think that's the big like value to social media, is you don't necessarily have to have everything like tightly packaged before you let it out into the public. And I've been victim of that before, because I'm like, oh, but I really like the theatricality of like, here it is, and boom. But then like, I feel like when people get to be part of the process of seeing it grow or seeing it be developed, I mean, look at Kickstarter. People love that. You know, people love seeing the increments of getting there. So like what we're doing is trying to kind of like seed it for a little while, and it's gonna get better. Like not everything has to be like super polished and perfect before you launch it. So that's how I feel.
Yeah.
See, for me, I like entertaining people.
Yeah.
I like knowing that, because it's not my primary job. My primary job is not entertaining people at all.
Yeah.
So I like knowing that something I do actually, people enjoy it. So that's always been my big thing. It's one of the reasons I want to be a writer. So my goals going in early on were just have fun. Then from there, I set new goals throughout the way. One of them was to write a novel. I did that through serialized fiction. Definitely, things go out there without being perfect then. And as soon as I was done with it, I realized all the places that I would need to go back and re-edit to have a finished product out of that. But my goal from that point was be paid for writing. So once that happened, the first time I got paid for it, just that sense of satisfaction really hit. It's like, okay, I can now, I always was able to say I was a writer because I was writing, but now I can say I'm a paid writer. Sure, it was $26, but it's something. And that was kind of a big goal for me. And from that, like I said, that's my end goal, is I want to do full novels. And I want to actually be published by one of the big publishing houses. Don't know if it'll ever happen or not, but in the meantime, I'm going to get a lot of things out there for a lot of people to read. And I love getting feedback on it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
My goals are really selfish. I want to do cool things. I want to do cool things with cool people. But I justify that by thinking that that's also what my audience would want to hear. Nobody wants to listen to me talk about a game for 20 minutes. I tried once, it went really poorly. But because you don't know me, and you'll get to know me by listening to the podcast if you do, but you're not just going to jump in because, ooh, Chase Kennedy has a podcast. But if well, of course, because I'm an esteemed panelist now. But if it was Chase Kennedy has a podcast with John Drake from Harmonix, you might have heard of Harmonix. They make Rock Band. People like Rock Band. That was not the game we talked about because it's not handheld. But still, somebody from Harmonix, that's interesting. Somebody from Double Fine, that's interesting. Somebody, I've actually had the Yacht Club Games guys on too, to talk about Shovel Knight. And those are really interesting podcasts because you get to talk to people that people care about. And then I'll try doing a podcast with me and maybe a friend who we're both really passionate about an older game that you might not have heard of. And that's kind of the second goal, is to re-stoke this passion about handheld games, because there's some really good ones out there. The first episode I did was on Super Mario Land. One, because it's a pretty iconic game. Two, because it's a pretty awesome game. People should play Super Mario Land because it is so much different than Super Mario Brothers, because it's made by a completely different person, and it's not a fireball, it's a bouncy ball that just bounces around. And there are sphinxes and pyramids, and that's not something that Super Mario Brothers actually really has.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thought.
Yeah.
I actually had a question that I'd like to ask you guys that maybe could help some people out here. What's your setup when you're actually making something? Because I'm sure a lot of people here might be interested in making their own content, because that's why I'd probably come to this panel. So I mean, for me, I'll start off to give you kind of an example. I do things super cheaply. I have this down more or less free. I bought a $60 mic, like the Snowball mic, and that's only for if I can get somebody locally in the studio, my apartment. But everything else, it's edited on GarageBand. It goes up on a Tumblr page. I did pay for the URL gamersonthego.com, but it takes you to a Tumblr page free. And that it goes through FeedBurner to iTunes, and it's all picked up free, and it's all located on a Dropbox, which was also free. So yeah, it is more or less free, other than like the $15 for the domain and the mic that gets used occasionally. But to get guests on, I'll use Skype, unless I can get them in the studio. And I like doing things really cheaply because I don't have a lot of money, and honestly, I think as long as I can put out solid content that people like, you don't have to have a really nice setup.
Yeah, and that was one of the things we helped you out with too, is that we host all of your content now, and you can actually go onto our iTunes page and you'll be able to see all of Chase's stuff he's done on this new one, the Gamers on the Go, where in the past you were doing it through Dropbox and it was only keeping the top 3. Yeah. So that was like one of the big things, and I was like, yeah man, so like I want you to be a part of this, and yeah, we'll totally host it, and that's one thing that we're able to do for him.
Yeah, now you can listen to all 45 episodes.
Yeah. There's some real good ones in there.
And there will be a 46th one going up tomorrow.
There we go.
Shameless plug.
So free is definitely good, but on the other side of the fence, from an audio standpoint, for Fear the Boot, we have about $1,500 worth of audio equipment that is set up in one room that is dedicated to just recording Fear the Boot podcast. And that's been accumulated and upgraded over the course of the 8-year run of the podcast. For Funny Books, it's a bunch of guys on Skype. When possible, we all record locally using Audacity as our recording, audio editor of choice, because also it's free. I personally, when I'm not doing Fear the Boot, when I'm remote or when I'm doing one of the other podcasts, I have a Yeti, I think it was a Blue Yeti mic. It's a nice $100 mic, not too expensive, but gives a really good quality, and it has adjustments on it, so you can change it based on what you're doing. So it'll either record in the round, or it'll record aimed at you, or record across from you and at you. It gives a lot of options for really cheap USB device. I've also got a couple of digital recorders that I've taken around to conventions, because I like to get sound on convention floors, and you can't really do that with carrying a laptop around. Video, just kind of starting to play with it, and I went with a GoPro for that.
Nice.
I tried a few other things early on, that just like using my phone, and while it worked, and the quality was actually surprisingly pretty good with some of the modern phones, it just seemed better to have the GoPro set up, because I could do a lot of remote work on it with my phone, with the apps.
Sure.
So Wayne, I just had a question. When you record multiple people locally, how do they give you those? So they're recording, like, if you want to explain it, they're recording on their computer. Each person has like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Like, is that how that works?
Yep. Basically, we all connect in with Skype. We all have our own Audacity. keep wanting to say Audible for some reason. We all have Audacity running locally, recording our personal chain, and then we start at the beginning with a count off, 1, 2, 3, and then when you look at the audio recordings, you can see the spikes of when people say things, and you can use that to line up the audio recordings.
So they have a clean signal for each person.
So each person has a clean one that you edit together, all of the streams. It's a little more work, but it works much better when you have one person that has just a bad connection in. They may cut in and out on Skype, but their local recording is still good.
Yeah. And that's what I did on our podcast is, we were remote, so we had my friends Skype in, and then I record the Skype conversation, actually. So it's on the cheaper, less work for me end of things, but the quality can be obviously not as good.
That's how we do all of our interviews.
Yeah.
Because we keep it in mind that, as far as we're concerned, we think people look at interviews like they would look at a call-in on a radio show.
Sure.
So we do.
my car.
Yeah, we do all of our interviews like that, and you know, if we have somebody on that's not a regular podcaster, same thing. We'll just do the Skype recording.
Yeah.
Most people can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
It's only when we know that one of our regular hosts has a horrible connection, and he would be cutting in and out, and it would be really noticeable.
Yeah.
So that's why we tend to do it that way, just because we know one person has a really bad connection.
Yeah.
And when you're interviewing somebody who, like say the harmonics guy, you're like, hey, yeah, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it. By the way, can you also record your own thing and then send that to me? Oh no, you can't because you only have 20 minutes. Never mind. So you usually don't want to do that. If you can, if you are able to do that setup though, definitely invest in headphones of some sort, because the last thing you want is for one guy to not have his headphones in and for everyone's voice to be coming through his laptop mic, and then everyone else, it will mess up the entire thing. So that's something to keep track of.
So my setup for video, I use just a consumer camera, camcorder. This is what I use. Flip it around, point it at myself. That's pretty much what I use. And then we use it for if we're ever doing like a more staged video, like where we have to have a background. This is all right. It has some downfalls, but what I really want is just kind of a camera that looks like a normal point-and-shoot camera, because I go out and I vlog in public and stuff like that. Most of the time, what I do if I'm like at Starbucks or something, I'll put the camera like down like that, and then I'll like do the transaction, just to give the video a little bit more ambiance that I'm at a place, rather than like, hey guys, I'm at Starbucks, and it's just like, I don't think it's really attuned to my personality to do that. So having a camera that's a little bit more like a regular looking camera would be better than having this like plop down and people like stare at you like, why can't I see this? But
yeah, I love that camera from the looks of it. When we did a Kickstarter recently, it was before I bought the GoPro. So I ended up using a tablet that was set up and aimed at me, and I didn't think about it, the orientation of it, because I had it straight up and down and recorded vertically. And the Kickstarter video the first attempt was just horrible.
Sometimes I use my phone just if I forget, because I mean, phones now have awesome video. But I edit on Final Cut Pro X pretty easy. I mean, I just dump every clip in, and then I go in there and trim everything down. I started to do a little bit of music in the intro and outro. Upload to YouTube now exclusively, which is awesome. I mean, we kind of forget that it's like this free, depository for like everything, a repository for everything. Sometimes I'll post like huge videos if I have to give it to somebody just to watch, because I don't have to pay for it. But
and we discovered the private uploads.
Never
knew that was possible.
Awesome.
We had some Kickstarter rewards, and we kept trying to figure out, some of them were video. It's like, how do we get these out to people? What we ended up doing was doing the YouTube, going private and just sending the links out to the individuals. And that's how we got it to just them without it going public.
Yeah, like unlist your videos. It's really powerful. What else do I use? So for my comic, I use an iPad. So I draw a weekly comic, like I said, called Pillow Fighters, and I use an app called Procreate. And so it's basically like a Photoshop type of thing. I don't use a stylus. I draw everything with my fingers, and to refine things, I just zoom really, really far, and then I just refine stuff. I've been using that for about 6 months. and I love it. I think it's really cool, and you can you can export as Photoshop files, so you can get to the point where you're like as far as you can go with your drawing, export it as a Photoshop file, then you can like fine tune it. So I also have one of the Creative Cloud accounts for like $10 a month for Photoshop, which is awesome now that you can get into a pro level thing for pretty cheap.
Yeah.
And yeah, I kind of just use what I have. I mean, what I typically, my whole thing is I'll just use it until, I'll start with something really low end and I'll use it until I grow out of it. I don't believe in buying something so crazy before you even know how to like turn it on.
Yeah.
So that's why I said using your phone if you're just starting or you want to do YouTube, you have already a camera.
Yeah, definitely. Who do you use for your website?
I use Blogspot or Blogger.
Yeah, isn't that free? Or?
Yeah, that's free. The only
Cool.
thing that costs money is the domain name from
Gotcha.
Google, and that gave me my own email address, phil@superphilipscentral.com.
Nice.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's awesome.
Yeah.
My
That's why I said we pay for an internet site, but we also give out free space for probably 5-6 other podcasts and websites.
oh cool.
So there is one pay site, but we're providing for a lot of other content creators that are just friends and within our circles.
Yeah.
It's nice, we have one guy that's willing to spend the money, so
Yeah,
we just let him spend the money and then we all take advantage of it.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
because I like to review like 5 games a month,
Mhm.
that costs money, obviously. So
Sure.
that's where it gets me. But sometimes indie developers are nice, and if I ask for a code and say, I'm interested in reviewing your game, I think it would get good attention, then they'll go, okay, and then I'll say, I'll have it done by this week.
Hmm.
And I like to give them a time frame, because you don't want to leave
Sure.
it hanging yet.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry to butt in.
No, you're fine. Yeah, what I always say about content creation, and when you're getting started in content creation, if you haven't started yet, the big thing is, the most important thing is somehow starting, somehow beginning, and do not let the tools or the price, like I have to have a $100 mic, or I have to have X camera, or I have to have this pro kind of website.
Yeah. A lot of podcasters I know started off with the mic they got with their PlayStation or their Xbox.
Yes.
Because they were USB, they plugged in, worked just fine.
Yeah, I mean, our first, I don't necessarily recommend this, but like I said, don't let tools or things hinder you from starting. And our first podcast that we did was just a recording of Skype. So we just we had our headphones in, or our Apple headphones in that had a mic, and we just used that. And yes, don't go back and listen to that, but it started. It got us started, and then we listened to that, and we're like, this is really horrible, but we're gonna put it out there, and we're buying mics this next week. And we went on eBay and we bought $40 mics or whatever. And even just a $40 mic was a huge jump, but we didn't let not having that mic stop us. And that's any kind of content creation. I say, like, you just gotta start. So don't let anything stop you.
I think back to like when I started the Pillow Fighters, I was trying to pawn it off on another artist. I was like, oh, it's gonna suck if I do it. Like, I'm not good enough. So like I was trying to source artists over and over and over.
That's why I've never done a webcam, because I have no artistic ability.
Yeah, and see, and I'm like, I guess I just didn't have the confidence at the time. But then I thought back to like, okay, all the people that I admire in like animation, like South Park, looked like crap when it came out, right? It was like,
Well, they're still super simple.
Right.
It's not like
It still looks
it
like
was
crap.
like really simple, and then all of a sudden it's like
But, like,
3D now or
The
something.
Simpsons, like, you know, super
Yeah.
crude, you know, Family Guy, all that stuff. But it started like the spark, and people saw the charm in what they were doing to be able to build upon that. That started. All of those started from the actual creator's hands of the Matt Greening and Trey and Matt and all that. And then that got people interested. But you're saying, if you don't start, you're not going to get anyone behind you.
Yeah, it's started.
You know.
It's just started. Don't let anything stop you, really.
Yeah, if you're doing a blog like I did, what I started out doing was just posting news. It didn't have to be original content. I mean, obviously you don't steal a news article from somebody and post it on your own blog. That would get you in trouble.
Well, as long as you credit it,
Yeah,
you can.
credit.
You can say.
And don't credit it was the last part I was gonna say.
Yeah, because you can say like, this is this new thing that just came out. This is what this website said about it, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you guys have a moment in your content creation kind of career or while making it that is like your most positive, best, like good moment that you feel like are successful. You feel like, I don't know, maybe it was a specific person you had on your podcast, maybe it was someone you got to talk to. It could be very broad, but just one moment. I'm sure there was a lot, but
Yeah, definitely. It was, I think the big one for me was getting, his name was Patrick Hackett. Was at the time at Double Fine. He'd come out with a game called Drop Chord for iPhones and also for PC, and it used some crazy controller that nobody uses anymore. But he's not a Double Fine anymore. But that was the first time I'd gotten on a developer, and it wasn't just me and a friend that I knew, or like the guy that I met at PAX East, who is just my friend who lives in Boston now, and I call him and we do shows. But to get somebody who more or less mattered, and to be able to have that person respond and go, yeah, I'd love to talk about my game with you, and to spend an hour with that person talking about how they actually developed the game, some of the design decisions that went into it, and we had this really great interview, and it totally got me onto this kick of, I want to do that again, I want to do that with more people, and you just send out a ton of emails to tons and tons of people, and you get rejected a lot, or not even rejected, you just get ignored. But for the few who do say yes and come on, you have a great time, and yeah, 45 episodes strong now, and I'd say maybe half to a third are ones with actual developers, and the one coming out Monday is with a developer. So those are always the really fun shows that you can do, and the ones with friends are fun too because you're with your friends. But that was the moment where this could be a lot more than it is right now.
yeah, for sure.
So, kind of along the same lines, the very first time I talked to a major creator, I mean, there are so many moments, and that's what really keeps you going through even the difficult time, are all of the little moments. But for me, it was an interview with Dan Jurgens. For anyone that's not a comic book fan, that's the guy that killed Superman. Back in the 90s, he created Doomsday, and he wrote The Death of Superman. And getting to talk to him, because I rushed home from work to make sure I could be home from work in time for the interview, and that was the first really big name of, this is a guy that I have read for years, and it's a guy that I look up to, and I get a chance to talk to him now, and I get a chance to brag for the next 10 years that I've talked to him. And there's a lot of the little moments, but that was the first time something like that happened.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, it made me want to talk to more people. And that started the mass mailings to get out there and just see what you can get. Yeah, a lot of times you do get ignored, you don't get past secretaries, but you'd be surprised how many people will just answer and will come back. And I've talked to so many people that I always looked up to before, and I mean, on both podcasts. And it's just one of those things, in the beginning, you don't think you're big enough, but once you just start getting out there, a lot of times these people want to talk.
Yeah.
And I have them on my emails. Some of the ones that I really enjoy talking to, I still email back and forth and talk to on a regular basis outside of anything we're doing.
Yeah.
I would say probably mine's pretty humble. It's just when I launched the Pillow Fighters comic because I was did not think that I could actually draw and make my own and write my own webcomic because it felt so just far away from something I could do. Since my main business is Throwboy, and that's where my attention was for a long time. I don't really there's successes there that I could bring up, but they're not really related to content creation. So that's why just starting that, being able to have it up, and then having some of my artists, webcomic artist friends go oh, this is good, you're doing a good job. Oh, okay, cool, sigh of relief, I'm gonna keep doing it, you know?
Sure.
So I think that's kind of, that's one of my main, this is cool, I can keep doing it.
I have two, but it's basically one because they're related, because that's the rule I have set in my mind. And the first was getting a response back from Yacht Club Games and saying, yeah, we'll do an interview with you. That was awesome. And then the other one was the first time an indie developer reached out to me before I reached out to them.
Sure.
And then they said, we'd really like you to review our game.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I didn't use any kind of bias. You know, you sort of have some bias if someone gives you something. You're gonna be
Sure.
yeah, I gotta be a little nicer because they sort of gave it to me. I don't want to scare off other developers, but those two moments, which by my rules are one.
Have any of you ever had anyone ask you for an autograph?
No.
That
Not yet.
so that happened. Well, we ran.
You have, bro?
We
Over
were.
here?
Not me. He's talking to you.
No, you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we ran.
Oh, yeah.
We ran conventions for 8 years,
Oh, okay.
and people
the
can
fear the
fear the con.
or fear the con. Yeah.
And people would come in from all around the world, and these are. It is a convention of 200 people that listen to the podcast.
Wow.
Hardly anyone local. We have people from Australia, Japan,
Wow.
all over the world that just show up. And the first time it happened, I'm just like, okay, but why? I just talk. And then so I have a couple short stories published in books. And first time I saw the book was one of those moments of, just still standing
Kind
in
of
shock.
gleaming,
but
like, oh man.
first time somebody brought one of those up to me and asked for an autograph, it's the same thing. It's like, I don't mind, but why? Why do you want it?
Yeah, sure.
You know it's not worth anything, right?
Yes, not yet. Not yet.
Now the UPS man made me sign for something, but I took it as an autograph. It was all
Big fan.
front. Big fan.
Yeah, exactly. In that same vein, when we made our website, me and my partner, I think it was, I really enjoyed, one of the moments I really enjoyed is when we sent out email to Kansas City Comic-Con to say, hey, we want to come, we want to, can you give us press passes, and, we'll come do some coverage. And when they replied to us, we both, we're on chat, and we're like, oh, did you see that email? Like, oh my goodness, we're going to get in for free to this Kansas City Comic-Con. It's like, we got to get down there now. And that was just like an aha moment, just like a cool moment.
Press passes are the best. If you want to go to anything that's in your vein, it never hurts to ask.
Yeah.
I've had press passes for Gen Con, St. Louis Comic Con. There's a horror convention around here that I went to. There's a couple others I can't think of at the moment. But some of the other guys on Fear the Boot got press passes for San Diego Comic Con.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And
That's our next goal. Is like the big ones.
Yes.
All
The
it
big
took
ones.
was asking.
Yeah.
And showing. Once you've done a few of the small ones, then when you talk to the big ones, you can point it back and say, here was our coverage of this previous convention, and show that you actually are there to cover it. Because a lot of people just get the press pass so they can go and spend time and have fun. But if you can actually point back and say, here is our coverage, then you're more likely to get one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, and it's also helpful. So, what I did originally when we first got started is I went to conventions and I paid to get into them, but I still did coverage. So then I can say oh yeah, I went to whatever convention and this is the coverage I did, and they're like, oh okay, and you have a blog, you update it regularly, and so this is not just some random guy trying to get in for free essentially. So I'm a strong believer of fail fast and often. So in that vein, I'm wondering what is something where you failed, something did not work out, but you kind of learned and grew from that, right? And, I like telling people about that, and I think it's really helpful for people because we, by no means, at least I'll tell you, I did not do everything correct the first time. So anyone can start.
You gotta love writing a 3,000-word article and about 10 people read it over a span of a month. That happened a lot early on, and sometimes. Nowadays, sometimes it's just 50, but that's okay. It's not okay, but it's okay.
So for my company, for Throwboy, when I first tried to go from handmade to factory made, I found some factory I didn't know what I was doing back then. I Googled it and found something. They ended up putting on the tag on the back of the pillow, "Made in Seattle." So back then, when I was doing it, they were made in Seattle, but they took my artwork literally and put it on there. And I didn't actually put that. I put design in Seattle. They changed it and messed it up. So I got I don't know how many thousand pillows. They were all said made in Seattle. They got stopped at customs, and customs flagged it we were trying to pull one over on the government.
You're importing fake things.
So they told us, okay, we'll release your shipment, but you have to cut off all the tags.
Oh, wow.
And then we're gonna send someone to your place and verify that you've done it. I had a garage full.
Just tags afterwards?
No, a garage full of pillows, like
Yeah.
stacked up. So I like had my roommates and me like sit there and cut all the tags off, and like they never ever followed up. I think it was just bluffing, right? So we kind of tried. That was sucky, and there's still pillows out there. Once in a while, I'll see someone like, hey, I have an old throwaway, and they show me the bag, and it has this like janky tag like cut off because like half a tag was still on it. And so I kind of tried to spin that as much as you can into like a story, like because people relate to just being like real, like, hey, this is what happened and it sucked and that's the way it went. So I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a really rare one. You know why? Because blah blah blah. You know. So that taught me a lot about how to do sourcing later, and luckily that's never happened again.
So many for the podcast overall, but I'm gonna go with personal ones. The biggest problem that I tend to have is overpromising. Either giving a time frame that's just unrealistic in the end, or talking about projects I plan on working on, they get really excited about, and then I just lose all interest and it never happens. There were multiple game systems that I wanted to write. There were multiple books that I talked about writing that never got past the first chapter.
Sure.
And when you mention it, then people will ask you years later, so whatever happened to that? Or you'll have you'll have someone that does design for a work saying, I'll give you a discount if you want me to do the design for that role-playing game you're working on.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't actually ever start that. I just talked about it.
Yeah.
And I've had all those happen to me that I talk about it and then I don't follow through.
Sure.
That's why like you mentioned earlier, just start.
Yeah.
When you start working on it and people start asking about it, you're more likely to finish.
Yeah.
And at least for me, this is a hobby. This is something I do on the side. So having the time to get to it, I need that extra boost for motivation.
Sure.
Yeah, thankfully it hasn't happened with Gamers on the Go, but previous podcasts, you have the four guys there, we're all talking, we talk for 2 hours, we have a great conversation, something about probably Metal Gear, and that happened a lot. There was one guy who was way into Metal Gear. And he's like, okay guys, great, good show, I have to leave now, close the laptop, let's go. Oh, hey, by the way, did you save the podcast? No, you guys want to record again? So yeah, losing shows sucks.
Hours.
It happens. Thankfully, it hasn't happened with Gamers on the Go, but it'll happen.
That's happened to me. I used to have a video podcast where we talked about technology, me and my friend, and we did a whole hour show, and then is the red light off? So I did the whole thing, and then he was so annoyed, and I was like, "Hey, we gotta suck it up. No one cares. No one knows." And he tried to do.
It's like a secret almost.
Yeah.
Like we're never telling anyone what just happened in this room.
But he tried to kind of he tried to reference it a few times. He's like, and I'm like, no one knows.
I'm cutting that out.
Nobody cares either,
And the hardest thing, if you actually go and try to recreate that, you've already done it. It's going to sound flat the second time. It never is as good the second time. And I've had that happen. I had Audible eat a file once, but I found out that it actually saves in the background.
Oh.
And it was able to go through and do a restore. So it took, I think, 3 hours to do the restore. Wow. So there was a very tense 3 hours.
Because are you going to all sound like robots? Once you restore this, you're just like,
Well, and that was an interview.
Yeah.
It's worse if it's it's an interview where you don't know if you can get the person back.
Oh, yeah. Well, and even if you can, you feel like just a jerk, an idiot. You have no, especially, thank goodness I haven't had it happen to someone who's actually, I feel important or whatever. You're just like, I feel like you just lie. You're like, so that one didn't work out. We love you. But going back to someone and just being like,
we were actually grateful it happened once. We had somebody on that, we brought him on thinking it was going to be really interesting, and it ended up being the driest, worst interview we'd ever done. And the audio ate it. I can't believe that. We're so sorry. We'll have to reschedule.
Right. So was that the audio ate it?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, no, the audio
deletes.
That's the thing is, we were very honest. We would we were going to release it, but the audio legitimately ate it. And after it was over, we're all like, Thank God. And I'm sure he's still waiting for that 6 years later.
Yeah, we had one of our podcasts. We did we were recording for like an hour or so. It just did. I forget exactly what happened. If we didn't hit record or just it got messed up or whatever. So it actually helped us in a positive way because we were like, okay, like you said, we're not going to be able to go through this conversation again for an hour or whatever. It's just going to be boring to us. So then it's going to be boring to the people. So we're like, well, let's try a different model that we've always kind of talked about. And we kind of just did like a top 5. It was for The Walking Dead. So we're like, let's just do our like top 3, top 5 moments and see what that is. And it actually ended up becoming our new model because it was way faster and more interesting. Than hearing us blabble. I'm like, oh, I liked this death or whatever, you know, right?
And back to the failures. My other big failure, it's one that I still have now, is scheduling. Like you've heard a lot of these people here, like 5 reviews a month, 2 vlogs a week, getting weekly content posted. Yeah, weekly podcast. My show doesn't have that, which it's kind of built in because I try to make it, these shows are timeless and you could listen to them at any point because they're about a specific game at a specific time, and that's not going to change. I'm not there going, well, hey, this is the news today, and then next week nobody cares about that news.
Yeah.
I've done some shows when I'm actually at a convention though, and those are the ones that don't hold up. But hopefully the thought is, if you can make some kind of evergreen content, it doesn't matter so much about a schedule. But if you're making content out there on the internet, you want to set a schedule. You want people to know that they can come in every Monday or every Thursday night and know that they're going to see content by you. Yeah. So that I definitely attribute why I have, 50 Twitter followers for Gamers on the Go at GOTG Podcast, by the way.
Shameless plug.
Number 2, yeah. Well done. Good call.
It is very important in building an audience to be able to have a regular release schedule. But that in mind, as a listener of other podcasts, one of the biggest mistakes I think podcasters make is the constant apologizing for how late they are. Yeah. Because people go back. It's not just that you release this and people listen to it right now. You can watch the trends. People will find your podcast after it's been out there for years and go back and listen from the beginning. They don't know you were late, except you just told them and apologized 3 or 4 times, and suddenly you've got the reputation for being late with somebody that has no idea.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm sure you all have busy schedules. Like I've got like 3 or 4 podcasts that have like a backlog that I just haven't gotten to quite yet. I'm not able to listen to everything I want to the week that it came out. Yeah. So sometimes it's not terrible, but you do want to, at least for yourself and for your listeners or readers or whatever, you want them to know I can go here and I know I'm going to get a new show or a new blog is up that I can
Be consistent, but don't feel like you have to put out something that's subpar if you're going to miss a week. Yeah. People can forgive the occasional miss if you set a track record.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're almost out of time, but I did want to open up to anyone. If anyone has any questions, we could take a couple.
Yeah. So, like, all of you create content on your own. It's easy because we've created content, but sometimes it's easy to look and go, there's a wall in front of us, and we are clearly not climbing it very quickly. If ever, has there been a time where you looked and gone like, I don't know how to get past this, or whether it's marketing, we're not getting new people in, or whether you, as far as ideas, have run dry, like, has there ever been a moment, and how did you kind of cope with that?
Constantly. Yeah. It is very frequently we'll look and be, we've been sitting at the same number of listeners for a year. What can we do to reach out? And, on the same lines for Fear the Con we were running, we could never get local people. Still don't know why we never could. We were getting listeners from around the world, but we couldn't get more than 5 or 10 local people to show up. And one of the things I always struggle with on that is, how do we reach out? What I find for us, listener-wise, is once we reach that point where we think we've saturated everyone our pool of people, then we start cross-promoting with other people. They can be smaller podcasts because even though they have less listeners, maybe they have half the number of listeners, there are some that aren't cross-pollinated. That gets new people listening. Interviews are good for a one-time pop, but you have to be particularly interesting enough to catch someone's attention. Otherwise, they listen because the person's on there, they may not listen anymore. A lot of it, though, is just getting out there and talking to people.
Yeah,
it is really building a community, interacting on social media. Just something will hit.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll feel like you're stuck. You'll feel like you're never going to get past it, and then something will break. And then there's going to be another wall.
Yeah.
But just keep out there. You will break through.
Yeah. Yes.
I feel like this is a huge podcast, so I'm going to ask a question. How do you guys feel about Nintendo going to phones and new Pokemon Go game coming up?
That's probably maybe a personal.
Oh, a handheld game question? You look at the handheld
Well, I'm
game.
saying you probably have a personal
Wow.
conversation later.
Yeah,
because,
sure.
that's a can of worms in the sense that we could all.
I'm pro.
Kind of all, yeah. It's simply put, I'm pro. Are you pro? You follow
I don't
Nintendo.
care.
He doesn't. You can't
I
either
follow
way.
Nintendo, but I don't care. It's more,
Yeah.
it's more the Pokemon company and not Nintendo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I immediately forwarded the first article I saw about it to my wife, and
Yeah.
because she's a huge Pokemon fan too.
Yeah.
And the idea of an augmented game and being able to find people, it may actually get her out of the house more often.
Yeah, I tweeted on Facebook. I put I guess in 2016 I will only be hanging out with Pokemon trainers. Thank you, Pokemon.
I know I'll be looking at my phone, I'll be chasing a Mankey, and then I'll run right into traffic, and that'll be the end of me.
Guys, did you hear Mewtwo's at Busch Stadium? I gotta go. Cardinal game? Who cares? I'm Mewtwo!
No, that's real though, because we work downtown.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, Chase, can you help me fight this?
Oh, yeah.
You know he's Mewtwo, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
So you run out in the middle of the field during the game?
Don't worry about it, guys. There's a Mewtwo here. You can go back to your game in a second.
That's
And the thing is,
Gabe's an
in that
interesting
trailer,
point.
everybody caught Mewtwo, so Mewtwo would basically be useless after that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my wife takes out her DS at all of the conventions
Yeah.
and just sees, now we're going to have that at big things like stadiums. You're sitting at a baseball game and everyone has their phone up.
Yeah.
Like, trying to fight this for one Mewtwo or, like, Legendary.
Cool. Were there any other questions?
One of the ones that we run into a lot, we've gone back and forth with where you put a basic game on YouTube, stuff like that. It feels more personal when you do.
Sure.
It makes you a little more.
Yeah.
A big one that we keep on flip-flopping on is length of content. So we'll go from 15 minutes to a 45-minute segment. If we're playing RPG, we might go an hour segments, like that. What do you guys feel about attention span on YouTube? Because we'll look at our stats and it's like, this guy watched it for 15 seconds and he pushed out. It's like,
Yeah.
he died.
Yeah.
1% is we see the whole video, some of the things.
Sure, sure. So the question for people who didn't really hear that was the length of content that you're creating. What is that, right? And that actually, and I'm sure we all know, depends on what kind of content you're creating, what platform you're on.
And the audience.
Yeah, and your audience is.
I have seen so many studies and all of them are different.
Yeah.
For us, we actually have reached out to the audience and asked them. We found one of our biggest questions wasn't just, do you listen, how long do you want it to be, but when do you listen, where do you listen?
Yeah.
And early in the podcast, this was before all of the digital devices were all out there, people's answers were, I burn it to a CD and I put it in my car and listen to it. So our original podcast length was based on how much length could fit on a CD. And it's kind of stuck since then.
Yeah. So I'm a personal believer in small, short content. I'm a believer of 45-second videos on YouTube and Facebook, right? Because especially as you're growing and you're trying to gain an audience and you're trying to get followers, you don't even have that long to catch their attention. Like you said, you saw these people dropping out. Like, you want them to eat a little bit and then be hungry for more. Whereas if you're giving them a 4 or 5, even 2-minute video, if they're not really invested in you, they're already almost kind of tired of you. No offense to you and the content you're creating, but that's just how it is these days. Where if you're making these really, once again, this is kind of a personal belief, you're making these very small little nuggets, they're like, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. And they'll kind of keep biting at these little things, right? And then once you create a following, I think it's definitely appropriate to then start maybe putting in larger chunks of things. Now that's video versus podcasting. I'm kind of in the like 30-minute, 45-minute range. It's the hour ones. You really need to have a good flow. You need to have a really good group of people. But once again, it kind of just varies. But I'm on the end of small chunks, right? Also in blogging, I'm on the end of photos and short writing. Now this is because I'm not a huge writer. Phil writes a lot, and he probably considers himself like a pretty good writer, right? I'm a horrible writer. I hate writing. And
He's
I'm not
still a writer. We all have self-confidence.
I watch a lot of Sesame Street tricks.
Exactly. Yeah, right. They help you spell everything.
Yeah. Learn to count that way.
Yeah.
Moved to HBO, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
up with that?
We try to limit the 800 words on the blog on the front.
Yeah.
But it's hard to stick to that.
Yeah, I would say like experiment too. You know, just like you're not. Also, don't try to chase what you think is the holy grail or whatever. Because at the end of the day, you're going to go back to you, and you're going to go back to what content you like to create, and what length feels right to you. And people, you're going to find a niche that likes that length of content, and you know. That's what I've noticed. You know, sometimes I'll post a 6-minute video, sometimes I just post an 11-minute video, and I'm just like, let me see, maybe people like it.
Yeah.
Oh, they don't really like it. You know, let me go back to 3. You know, so like try different things, but just try to be, you know, aware that you're gonna probably end up going back to the thing that you're just naturally doing. You know?
And accept whatever you put out there. Some people are going to like, but some people will hate.
Yeah.
You have to have a thick skin if you start reading comments, because
Yep.
there is
Honestly,
there will
don't
be
start.
negative.
I mean, that's honestly it.
Internet comments are where humanity goes to die.
Pretty much.
It's really bad. But yeah, man. Well, that's really the end of the show. We can go down the line and just say our names and where you can find us. So I'm Ryan Dampf, and I'm at livingnerdlife.com, and we're on Twitter at TeamNerdLife. And I also have my personal Twitter and Instagram too. My Twitter is I am Risen, and my Instagram is Risen, RYZN.
I'm Phil Stortzum. My site's www.superphillipscentral.com. I also have another blog, which is more for my games I'm making. It's called Stortzumsoft. You're not going to spell that, so don't worry about it. And you can find me on Twitter at SP_CENTRAL, so SP Central.
I'm Roberto Hoyos, and my main website is throwboy.com. So Throwboy.com, and it's at Throwboy everywhere. And so yeah, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and then thepillowfighters.com. Thepillowfighters.com is our website.
My name's Wayne Cole. You can find me at feartheboot.com, and everything else you can find off of there.
And Chase Kennedy, gamersonthego.com, or it's also on Living the Nerd Life. And if you want to know more, I have cards that have other things on there too, like Twitter and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we have cards too. All right, thanks.
Now you have cards too.
I actually thought about bringing